Hello everybody. Today we're going to be thinking about courage. The man on the tightrope going between those two rocks needed a lot of courage, didn't he? And sometimes we need courage too. To help us, we're going to think about a Bible story where people showed courage. The Bible's got some wonderful stories, and I think this is one of the most exciting stories there is. It's all about a man called Joshua. He was the man who took over the leadership of Israel after Moses had died, and it was a big task for him. Joshua taking over the land of Israel. He was going to take the people from the desert where they had been wandering around to the place called Jericho and then into the promised land. If you look at the map, you'll see the blue arrow, which is where the people were, and they had to cross Jordan and get to the place where the red arrow is, where it is Jericho. Well, he was feeling rather worried. How was it all going to work out? He wasn't sure. It was a big task to take all the people across Jordan, and it was certainly going to be a big task for him to get to the city of Jericho and to overcome that city. But God said to him, "Be strong and courageous." In fact, God said to him 3 times those very same words, "Be strong and courageous." God also told him to do something. He said, "Joshua, I want you to read the book of the law." Now, we've got a Bible, of course. Joshua didn't have a Bible in those days, but he did have the commandments and some of the laws that God had given to Israel. And God said, you think about them and think about what they mean and put them into practice every day of your life. So God was telling him, be strong and courageous and read the law, or read the Bible, we could say. And he was also saying, and I'll be with you. Now that was a great help to Joshua, because he didn't really want to go with all these people to Jericho on his own. But God made him a promise and said, I'll go with you, Joshua, and you won't be alone. Well, he told the people everything, and they were very pleased that they were going to move across Jordan and go to the city of Jericho, overcome that, and then move out into the promised land. It was a big thing to do, but Joshua was making sure that the people were very keen to do that. The new land was going to be called Canaan, and they were going to go first of all to Jericho. Let's have a look at Jericho, shall we? Here is the walls that you can see around the city. That's a make-believe at what it may have looked like in Joshua's day. I've actually been to Jericho several times. You can go in a cable car right up to the mountaintop, and then you can look down on Jericho, and it looks a little bit like this. It's not got walls today, of course, but you can still see possibly where archaeologists have dug up the walls from Joshua's day. Well, Joshua had to go to Jericho, and he wasn't sure what it was going to be like. So he got some spies, and he said, I want you to cross Jordan somehow or other, creep into Jericho, find out what it's like, and then come back and tell me all about it. So off they went. They had only got into Jericho when somebody told the king, there are some spies come into the city. And the king was very angry. He said, I want to find those spies and find out what they're up to. And he said to his servants, go and make sure you can find those spies. But the spies had already found a place where they were fairly safe. You see, this wall was so thick that some houses were built on top of the wall, and Rahab had a house on top of the wall. And she managed to let the men come in, and she hid them. So when the soldiers banged on the door, she was able to say, they're not here. She had taken them up on the roof, covered them with straw, and made sure that they were safe. And she just said to the soldiers, they're not here, they've gone away. In fact, they just managed to get out of the city before the gates were closed at night time. They've probably gone down towards the river. You ought to go down that way. And that's the way they went, as fast as they could. But she went back to the men, and she said to them, now listen, I've been very kind to you, but I do believe in your God. I believe he's great. He brought you across the Red Sea in the days of Moses, and we know that he'll bring you into this land. So please help me. And the men said, very well, we will. You've helped us, we'll help you. But how are we going to get out of the city? Now the gates are shut. and she said, I've got a plan, and this is my plan. I've got a big red rope. I'm going to tie it up so it's safe, and you can climb down the rope on the outside wall and run away. And she suggested, go up into the mountains. They won't find you up there. Stay there for 3 or 4 days, and then you can go home and tell Joshua all about what you have seen. And the men thought that was a brilliant idea. They climbed down the rope, and then they said to Rahab before they went, now listen, keep this red cord or red rope in your window, and when the army come against Jericho, you'll be safe, because we shall see where your house is, and we shall know to keep you safe. So Rahab put the red rope on the window, and she kept it there until the army started to come. The spies got back to Joshua, and they told him all they'd seen, told him about Rahab, told him about how she was so good and hid them, told them how the city was very secure, big thick walls, ready to fight a battle against them. But Joshua knew that they were going to be all right, because he was convinced that God was going to be with them. So he was told a plan. In fact, God gave him orders what they should do. God said, make up a procession. At the beginning of the procession, you want the army, the men who are trained to fight. And then they can be followed by the priests. And after the priests, the Ark of the Covenant. That was a special golden box which marked the presence of God right in the middle of the procession. After that, there would be the people. And the priests were to be the ones who had an important job. They had to blow a trumpet, a bit like this. Not the sort of trumpet we see today in brass bands, but one made of perhaps a horn of a sheep or a goat of one of those days. When I bought this in a shop in Jerusalem, the man in the shop blew it for me. It made a tremendous noise. But just imagine 7 of those. It would have been a very loud noise. And that's what Joshua said the people had to do. The priests had to shout, had to blow the trumpets as loud as they could. But the actual people had to keep quiet. They were to just walk around the city. And Joshua was told they had to do that every day for 6 days, in convoy, with a procession, just like I've explained, going around the city, circling each day for 6 days. The priests kept on blowing the trumpet, and after 6 days, Joshua said, now on the 7th day, we're going to go round 7 times, which made 13 altogether. 7 times the people said, we're tired, we're worn out, we've done all this walking these last 6 days. Do as you're told, said Joshua, because that's what God says we must do. We must walk round the city 7 times. Well, they did on the final day 7 times. And then Joshua gave an order. The priests were to blow an even louder noise, as loud as they possibly could. And then the people were to shout. And all those people shouted at the top of their voices, just like in the picture. The people shouted, the priest blew the trumpet, and the walls fell down. It was victory. Some people said, well, it must have been the priests blowing the trumpets that made the walls fall down. Other people said, no, it wasn't. We all shouted so loud. And the army said, no, it's because we were there. But everybody really knew none of that was true. It was God who had given them a miracle, and God had given them the victory, and none of them could claim that they were responsible for the victory. Well, they went and found Rahab and her family. The spies ran off and soon brought them back, and Rahab and her family joined the nation of Israel, and they were safe and secure. Well, it was a wonderful story, and Joshua gained the victory, but he had to have courage, didn't he? I'm sure Rahab had courage too. So did the spies. All of them had to have courage, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do what they had to do. Sometimes we find we're getting quite frightened about something we've got to say or something we've got to do. We have to be courageous. We have to try and show courage as best as we can. And when we look at the story of Joshua, we learn how God helped them. And God helps us when we ask him to give us courage to be able to do the right thing and say the right thing. Think about that, and as you reflect upon it, maybe it will help you if you get into a situation when you need courage, then God can help you if you ask him.